Right then, hello everyone, and welcome to the Artificial Fluency Podcast. I'm Emily, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you join me today for this special hour-long episode all about life in modern Britain. Whether you're planning to visit the UK, thinking about studying here, or simply curious about British culture and society, today's program is designed to give you a proper insight into what life is actually like in Britain today. Now, when most people think about Britain, they often picture red double-decker buses, the Queen's Guard with their tall black hats, fish and chips, and perhaps a bit of rain. And whilst these iconic images are indeed part of British culture, there's so much more to modern Britain than these traditional stereotypes. Today, we're going to explore the reality of contemporary British life, from our daily routines and social customs to our changing demographics and evolving traditions. I'll be taking you through various aspects of British society, including our education system, work culture, social life, food scene, transport networks, and regional differences. We'll also discuss some of the challenges and changes Britain has faced in recent years and how these have shaped the country we live in today. Throughout today's episode, I'll be using authentic British expressions and vocabulary, so you'll get plenty of exposure to the way we actually speak here in the UK. Don't worry if you don't catch everything the first time round. That's perfectly normal and part of the learning process. Right, let's crack on, shall we? Let's begin with something that affects every single person living in Britain, our famously unpredictable weather. Now, I know it's a bit of a cliché to talk about British weather, but honestly, it really does play a significant role in our daily lives and national character. The thing about British weather is that it's remarkably changeable. You can wake up to bright sunshine, pop out for lunch in a downpour, and find yourself enjoying a lovely evening without a cloud in the sky. This unpredictability has shaped our approach to dressing. We've mastered the art of layering clothes, and you'll rarely see a Brit venture out without at least checking the weather forecast. The concept of 4 seasons in one day is very real here. I remember last Tuesday, I started the morning in a t-shirt because it was quite warm, had to duck into a shop during a sudden hailstorm at lunchtime, and ended up needing a proper coat by evening. It keeps life interesting, I suppose. Our relationship with weather is fascinating from a cultural perspective. We use it as a universal conversation starter. Commenting on the weather is a safe, non-controversial way to chat with anyone, from your neighbour to the person standing next to you in a queue. Phrases like "lovely day, isn't it?" or "bit nippy today" are heard countless times every day across the country. We've also developed quite a sophisticated vocabulary for describing rain. We don't just say it's raining, we have drizzle, showers, downpours, spitting, bucketing down, and it's absolutely chucking it down. Each term describes a different intensity or type of rainfall, which shows just how much experience we have with wet weather. The weather also influences our social plans in interesting ways. Pub gardens are packed the moment there's a hint of sunshine, even if it's only 15 degrees. We call this phenomenon furniture weather. As soon as the sun comes out, outdoor furniture appears in gardens and parks across the nation. There's something wonderfully optimistic about the British response to good weather, perhaps because we know it might not last long. Our relationship with weather is fascinating from a cultural perspective. We use it as a universal conversation starter. Commenting on the weather is a safe, non-controversial way to chat with anyone, from your neighbour to the person standing next to you in a queue. Phrases like "lovely day, isn't it?" or "bit nippy today" are heard countless times every day across the country. We've also developed quite a sophisticated vocabulary for describing rain. We don't just say it's raining, we have drizzle, showers, downpours, spitting, bucketing down, and it's absolutely chucking it down. Each term describes a different intensity or type of rainfall, which shows just how much experience we have with wet weather. The weather also influences our social plans in interesting ways. Pub gardens are packed the moment there's a hint of sunshine, even if it's only 15 degrees. We call this phenomenon furniture weather. As soon as the sun comes out, outdoor furniture appears in gardens and parks across the nation. There's something wonderfully optimistic about the British response to good weather, perhaps because we know it might not last long. Now, let's talk about British social customs and etiquette, which can be quite puzzling for visitors, but are absolutely fascinating when you understand the underlying principles. British politeness is legendary, but it's more complex than simply saying please and thank you, though we do say those an awful lot. The art of queuing is perhaps our most famous social custom. We form orderly queues for everything: buses, shops, coffee, you name it. But it's not just about standing in line, there's a whole etiquette around queuing. You must never push in, you should leave appropriate space between yourself and the person in front, and if you accidentally jump a queue, a profuse apology is absolutely essential. I witnessed a perfect example of British queuing etiquette just yesterday at the post office. A tourist accidentally joined the queue in the wrong place, and instead of anyone getting cross, the person behind gently said, "Excuse me, I think the queue actually starts back there." The tourist was mortified and apologized repeatedly, whilst everyone assured him it was no trouble at all. That's very British. We help each other follow the rules whilst minimizing embarrassment. Our use of language for politeness is quite sophisticated. We often use indirect language to make requests or express disagreement. Instead of saying, "I disagree," we might say, "I see your point, but," or "That's an interesting perspective, however." We also use understatement frequently, describing something as "not bad" when we actually think it's excellent, or saying we're a bit concerned when we're actually quite worried. The phrase "I'm sorry" is used far more broadly than just for apologies. We say sorry when someone bumps into us, when we need to get past someone, when we're asking for directions, or even when we haven't heard what someone said. It's become a social lubricant that helps interactions run smoothly. Emily, British humor deserves special mention because it's such a defining characteristic of our culture. We tend to be quite self-deprecating, making fun of ourselves before others can do it for us. Sarcasm and irony are common, and we often say the opposite of what we mean for humorous effect. Dry humor is particularly British. We might make jokes with a completely straight face, and the humor comes from the understatement or the unexpectedness of the comment. For example, if it's pouring with rain, someone might say with perfect seriousness, "Lovely weather for ducks." This type of humor can be confusing for people learning English because the tone doesn't always match the content. We also have a tradition of gentle teasing among friends and colleagues. This is called taking the mickey or having a laugh, and it's actually a sign of affection and acceptance. If your British friends start teasing you gently, it means they like you. However, this can be tricky for non-native speakers to navigate, so don't worry if you find it confusing at first. Let's move on to discuss the British education system, which has some unique features that might surprise you. Education is compulsory from age 5 to 18, and the system varies slightly between England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, though I'll focus mainly on the English system today. Primary school runs from ages 5 to 11, and it's where children learn the basics: reading, writing, math, and various other subjects. What's interesting is that British primary schools place quite a strong emphasis on creativity and play-based learning, especially in the early years. Children often sit on carpets for story time, and lessons frequently involve hands-on activities and group work. Secondary school, from ages 11 to 16, culminates in GCSE exams, General Certificate of Secondary Education. Students typically take between 8 and 12 GCSE subjects, including core subjects like English, math, and science, plus optional subjects they choose based on their interests and career aspirations. After GCSEs, students have several options. They can continue with A-levels, advanced levels, for 2 more years if they're planning to go to university. A-levels are quite specialized. Students typically choose just 3 or 4 subjects to study in depth. Alternatively, they might choose vocational courses, apprenticeships, or enter the workforce. The house system in many British schools is quite distinctive. Students are divided into houses, often named after famous people, local landmarks, or simply colours, and these houses compete throughout the year in sports, academic competitions, and other activities. It's designed to create a sense of belonging and healthy competition. School uniform is still very common in British schools, from primary right through to 6th form. This might seem old-fashioned, but it's actually quite practical. It reduces inequality between students from different economic backgrounds and eliminates the daily decision about what to wear. Emily, university culture in Britain is quite unique and worth exploring. We have some of the world's oldest and most prestigious universities, like Oxford and Cambridge, collectively known as Oxbridge, but we also have many excellent modern universities across the country. The application process is centralized through UCAS, Universities and Colleges Admission Service, where students apply to up to 5 universities with one application. This system is quite different from many other countries and helps ensure fairness in the application process. British university courses are typically more specialized than in some other countries. Students often apply to study a specific subject from day one, rather than doing general studies first. A typical undergraduate degree lasts 3 years in England and Wales or 4 years in Scotland. University life includes some wonderful traditions. Freshers' Week, Orientation Week, is legendary for helping new students settle in and make friends. Students typically live in halls of residence, dormitories in their first year, then often move into shared houses with friends for subsequent years. The student experience varies enormously depending on the university and location. Studying in London offers incredible opportunities but is expensive, whilst university towns like Bath, Durham or St Andrews offer a more traditional collegiate atmosphere where the university is the heart of the community. Now, let's explore British work culture, which has evolved significantly over the past few decades. The traditional 9-to-5 working day is still common, but there's been a notable shift towards more flexible working arrangements, especially accelerated by the pandemic. Many British companies now offer flexible working options, including working from home several days a week, flexible start and finish times, or compressed working weeks. The concept of work-life balance has become increasingly important, and employers recognize that happy, well-rested employees are more productive. The British workplace tends to be relatively informal in terms of interpersonal relationships. Colleagues often become friends, and it's common to socialize outside work. After-work drinks on Friday, known as Friday drinks or going for a quick punt, are a cherished tradition in many offices, though participation is always optional. Holiday entitlement in the UK is quite generous compared to some countries. The legal minimum is 28 days per year, including bank holidays, but many employers offer more. Brits typically take longer holidays rather than lots of short breaks, and August is a particularly popular time for family holidays. The concept of sick days is handled differently here than in some countries. Employees don't typically have a set number of sick days they're allowed to take. Instead, there's an expectation that people will only take time off when genuinely ill, and most employers are quite understanding about occasional illness. Meeting culture can be quite distinctive. British meetings often involve considerable small talk before getting down to business, discussing the weather, weekend plans, or current events. This isn't wasting time, it's relationship building and helps create a comfortable atmosphere for the actual meeting. British food culture has undergone a remarkable transformation over the past few decades. While we still love our traditional dishes like fish and chips, Sunday roast, and a proper English breakfast, our culinary landscape has become wonderfully diverse and sophisticated. The traditional Sunday roast remains a cornerstone of British food culture. Families often gather for roast beef, lamb, or chicken with Yorkshire pudding, roast potatoes, vegetables, and gravy. It's not just about the food, it's about taking time together, often stretching the meal out over several hours with conversation and perhaps a walk afterwards. However, British cuisine now reflects our multicultural society. Indian curry is so popular it's often called Britain's national dish. You'll find excellent Indian, Chinese, Thai, Turkish, and Middle Eastern restaurants in every British town. This isn't just about restaurants either. Many of these international ingredients and cooking methods have been adopted into everyday British home cooking. The pub remains central to British social life, though the role of pubs has evolved. Modern pubs often serve excellent food, called gastropubs, alongside traditional drinks. The concept of pub grub has elevated from basic sandwiches to sophisticated meals while maintaining the relaxed, welcoming atmosphere that makes pubs special. British drinking culture is worth understanding. We often go to the pub not primarily to drink alcohol, but to socialize. Many pubs are family-friendly during the day, and it's perfectly acceptable to go to a pub just for a soft drink or coffee. The round system, where one person buys drinks for the whole group, then someone else buys the next round, is an important social custom that helps build relationships and ensures fairness. Tea culture remains strong, though coffee has gained considerable ground. The ritual of putting the kettle on during times of crisis, celebration, or simply when someone visits is still very much alive. Tea with biscuits, cookies, remains a comforting constant in British life. Let's discuss British transport, which is a constant source of both pride and frustration for us Brits. Our transport network is extensive and generally reliable, though it can be expensive and occasionally frustrating. London's transport system is world-renowned. The Underground, or Tube, is efficient, covers most of London, and has become iconic with its distinctive map design and mind the gap announcements. London buses are frequent and cover areas the Tube doesn't reach. Most Londoners rely heavily on public transport, and many don't own cars. However, transport in London is quite expensive. A daily travel pass can cost more than £15, which adds up quickly. This is why many Londoners have monthly or annual travel cards, and why tourists often find transport costs surprisingly high. Outside London, the picture is more mixed. Many cities have excellent public transport: Manchester's tram system, Edinburgh's buses, Birmingham's rail connections, but rural areas often have limited public transport, making car ownership more necessary. British trains connect most major cities efficiently, and train travel can be pleasant and convenient. However, our trains are notoriously expensive, especially for last-minute bookings. A return ticket from London to Edinburgh might cost £200 if bought on the day, but could be as little as £25 if booked well in advance. This pricing system baffles many visitors. The British driving experience has its own characteristics. We drive on the left, which initially confuses visitors, but most adapt quickly. Our roads are generally well maintained, though often narrow and winding, especially in rural areas. Roundabouts are everywhere. We love them because they keep traffic flowing, though they can be intimidating for unfamiliar drivers. Parking in British cities is notoriously difficult and expensive. Many people avoid driving into city centres, preferring to use park and ride facilities or public transport instead. Emily. British housing and how we live is quite distinctive and worth exploring. The majority of Brits dream of owning their own home, and home ownership rates are relatively high compared to some European countries, though this has become increasingly challenging for young people due to rising house prices. The types of housing available reflect our history and geography. Terraced houses, rows of houses joined together, are common in cities and towns. These often date from the Victorian era and can be quite charming, with bay windows, small front gardens, and original features like fireplaces and high ceilings. Semi-detached houses, joined to one neighbour, are very popular, offering more space than terraced houses, whilst being more affordable than detached houses. Detached houses are considered the pinnacle of home ownership, but are increasingly expensive, especially in the south of England. Flats, apartments, are common in cities and are often converted from larger Victorian houses. Purpose-built apartment blocks are also common, though British people generally prefer houses to flats when given the choice. British homes tend to be smaller than those in countries like America or Australia, which influences how we live. Gardens are particularly important to us. Even a small back garden is highly valued. We are passionate gardeners, and garden centres are hugely popular weekend destinations. The rental market has grown significantly, especially in expensive areas like London and the South East. Many young professionals rent for years before being able to buy, and the quality and security of rental properties has improved considerably over recent years. Let's explore regional differences across Britain, because despite being a relatively small country, we have remarkable diversity in accents, customs, and local pride. Understanding these regional variations is crucial for appreciating modern British life. The North-South divide is real and culturally significant. Generally speaking, the North is perceived as more friendly, down-to-earth, and community-oriented, while the South is seen as more prosperous but perhaps less approachable. Of course, these are generalizations, but they reflect genuine cultural differences that have historical roots. Northern cities like Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle, and Leeds have undergone remarkable regeneration over recent decades. They offer vibrant cultural scenes, excellent universities, and increasingly sophisticated food and entertainment options, often at a fraction of London prices. Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland each have distinct identities. Scotland in particular has its own legal system, education system, and increasingly distinct political direction. Welsh culture and language is experiencing a revival, and you'll hear Welsh spoken regularly in many parts of Wales. Accents vary dramatically across relatively short distances. A Geordie accent from Newcastle sounds completely different from a Yorkshire accent just a few hours south. Scouse from Liverpool, Brummie from Birmingham, and West Coast accents are all distinctly recognizable to British ears. These regional differences extend beyond accents to local customs, food preference. British social life and leisure activities reflect our climate, culture, and history in interesting ways. Weekend activities often depend on the weather, but we've become quite adaptable in our pursuit of enjoyment. The British love affair with gardening is remarkable. Garden centres are packed every weekend, and gardening programmes are hugely popular on television. Even people with tiny urban gardens or just window boxes take pride in growing something. Allotments, small plots of land rented for growing vegetables, have long waiting lists in many areas. Walking is our most popular form of exercise and leisure activity. We have extensive public footpath networks, and going for a walk is a common weekend activity. Coastal path walking is particularly popular, and many Brits plan holidays around walking opportunities. British people are increasingly interested in fitness and wellness. Gym membership has grown significantly, and activities like yoga, cycling, and running clubs are very popular. The park run phenomenon, free, timed 5-kilometer runs held every Saturday morning in parks across the country, demonstrates our community-oriented approach to fitness. Social media has changed how younger Brits socialize, but traditional activities remain important. Meeting friends at the pub, having people round for dinner, and going to the cinema or theatre are still central to British social life. We're quite enthusiastic about festivals and events. Music festivals like Glastonbury have become cultural phenomenon, and every town seems to have its own annual festival, celebrating everything from food and drink to arts and crafts. Emily? Shopping culture in Britain has evolved dramatically with the rise of online shopping, but our high streets, main shopping areas, remain important social spaces. The British High Street traditionally featured a similar mix of shops in every town: a post office, pharmacy, grocery shops, clothing stores, and pubs. However, online shopping and large out-of-town shopping centres have challenged traditional high streets. Many towns are working to reinvent their centres, focusing on experiences, independent shops, cafes, and services that can't be replicated online. British people have embraced online shopping enthusiastically. Next-day delivery is common, and many people do their weekly grocery shopping online. This has been particularly accelerated by the pandemic, with many older people discovering online shopping for the first time. The British approach to sales and shopping has some distinctive features. We love a bargain, and January sales are still major events. Charity shops, thrift stores are hugely popular and socially acceptable across all social classes. Finding a bargain in a charity shop is a source of pride rather than embarrassment. Sunday shopping laws were relaxed in the 1990s, but many shops still have restricted Sunday hours, and it remains a quieter shopping day with a different, more relaxed atmosphere. Emily? British sports culture is passionate and tribal in ways that can surprise visitors. Football, soccer, dominates the sporting landscape, with the Premier League being followed globally, but our relationship with sports is complex and deeply emotional. Football clubs inspire incredible loyalty, often passed down through generations. Supporting your local team is about much more than the quality of football. It's about community identity, shared experiences, and belonging. This loyalty persists through relegation, poor performance, and decades of disappointment. Cricket holds a special place in British culture, representing a more gentle, traditional side of British character. Test matches at grounds like Lord's or the Oval are social occasions as much as sporting events, with spectators bringing picnics and making a day of it. Rugby divides along geographic lines. Rugby union is popular in certain regions and among certain social groups, while rugby league has strong regional followings in the north of England. Tennis becomes a national obsession for 2 weeks every summer during Wimbledon. Suddenly, everyone becomes a tennis expert, and watching Wimbledon while eating strawberries and cream becomes a cherished tradition. The Olympics and other major international competitions unite the country in ways that domestic sports sometimes don't. British success in cycling, rowing, and athletics has grown significantly over recent decades, supported by lottery funding and improved sports science. Let's discuss how technology has changed British life, because the digital revolution has been particularly embraced here. Britain has excellent mobile phone coverage and widespread broadband internet, making digital services integral to daily life. Online banking is almost universal. Most Brits rarely visit physical bank branches, instead managing their finances through mobile apps and websites. Contactless payments have been widely adopted, and it's increasingly common to see shops that prefer card payments over cash. The gig economy has flourished in British cities. Food delivery services like Deliveroo and Uber Eats have changed how young people eat, whilst ride-sharing services complement traditional taxis and public transport. Social media usage among British people is high, but there's growing awareness of its impact on mental health and social interaction. Many families try to implement digital detox periods or screen-free mealtimes. Streaming services have largely replaced traditional television viewing patterns, especially among younger people. The BBC iPlayer, along with Netflix, Amazon Prime, and other services, mean people watch programs when they want, rather than following traditional schedules. Online shopping during the pandemic accelerated trends that were already developing, with even traditionally resistant demographics like elderly people becoming comfortable with digital services. As we approach the end of our exploration of modern British life, let's consider how recent events have shaped contemporary Britain. Brexit, the pandemic, and economic challenges have all influenced how we live, work, and think about our place in the world. Brexit continues to influence British politics and society, though daily life impacts have been less dramatic than many predicted. European travel requires more planning, some product availability has changed, and there are ongoing political debates, but most people's day-to-day experiences haven't fundamentally altered. The pandemic had profound impacts on British life, accelerating changes that were already underway. Working from home became normal for many office workers, online shopping expanded dramatically, and there's increased awareness of mental health and work-life balance. Economic pressures from inflation and rising energy costs are currently significant concerns for many British households. This is influencing spending patterns, heating decisions, and lifestyle choices in ways that cut across all social classes. Despite these challenges, British resilience and adaptability remain strong characteristics. There's a pragmatic approach to dealing with difficulties, complaining good-naturedly whilst getting on with necessary adaptations. The British sense of humour continues to help navigate difficult times. Self-deprecating jokes about our current challenges are common, and there's comfort in shared experiences of dealing with problems. Looking toward the future, Britain continues to evolve whilst maintaining its distinctive character. Immigration from many countries has enriched British culture enormously, creating vibrant, multicultural communities whilst sometimes creating tensions that require ongoing navigation. Young British people tend to be internationally minded, environmentally conscious, and digitally native in ways that distinguish them from previous generations. They're more likely to live in cities, rent rather than own property, and prioritize experiences over material possessions. Traditional British institutions like the monarchy, Parliament, and the BBC retain significant support, but face questions about their relevance and effectiveness in modern society. These debates reflect broader conversations about national identity and values. The creative industries remain a British strength: music, film, television, literature, and digital media, where British talent competes successfully globally whilst maintaining distinctively British characteristics. Regional differences may become more pronounced as different parts of the country pursue different economic and social strategies. Scotland's distinct political direction, Northern Ireland's unique position, and Wales's cultural revival all contribute to an increasingly complex national picture. Well, that brings us to the end of our extensive tour through modern British life. We've covered an enormous amount of ground today, from our relationship with weather and social customs to education, work, food, transport, housing, and the changes shaping contemporary Britain. I hope this has given you a genuine insight into what life is actually like here, beyond the stereotypes and tourist attractions. Britain is a country of contradictions. We're polite but can be quite direct. We love tradition but embrace change. We complain about the weather but wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And we're proud of our country whilst being happy to criticize it. Understanding British culture requires patience and observation. We often communicate as much through what we don't say as what we do say, and there are countless unwritten rules that govern social interaction. But don't let this intimidate you. British people are generally very forgiving of cultural mistakes and appreciate when visitors make an effort to understand our ways. If you're planning to visit or live in Britain, remember that regional differences are significant, and the experience of living in London is very different from living in Edinburgh, Cardiff, Belfast, or a small English market town. Each area has its own character and charm. Most importantly, remember that modern Britain is diverse, dynamic, and constantly evolving. What I've described today is a snapshot of life now, but British society continues to change and adapt whilst maintaining its core characteristics of politeness, pragmatism, and a slightly ironic sense of humour. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through British life. I hope you've enjoyed learning about our quirks and customs, and that this knowledge will help you better understand British culture, whether you encounter it through media, travel, or study. This is Emily from Artificial Fluency, reminding you that understanding a culture is just as important as learning its language. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and remember, when in doubt, put the kettle on and have a nice cup of tea. Welcome to Artificial Fluency Podcast. I'm Emma, and today we're exploring the fascinating world of learning psychology. Ever wondered why some people pick up languages effortlessly while others struggle? The secrets lie in your brain, and I can't wait to share them with you. Did you know your brain physically changes when you learn something new? It's called neuroplasticity, and it's absolutely revolutionary for language learners. When you practice English, you're actually creating new neural pathways that get stronger every time you use them. Isn't that incredible? Let's dive straight into our first mind-blowing concept, the learning zone. Imagine 3 concentric circles. The innermost circle is your comfort zone, things you already know well. The outermost circle is the panic zone, material so difficult it overwhelms you. But between them, that's the learning zone, where the magic happens. The best language learning occurs when you're slightly challenged but not completely lost. That sweet spot triggers your brain to form those new connections we talked about. So if you're finding your English practice too easy or impossibly hard, you need to adjust. Now, let's practice some essential vocabulary about learning psychology. Repeat after me to absorb information, to take in and understand new knowledge. To have a breakthrough, to suddenly understand something difficult. Retention, how well you remember what you've learned. Cognitive load, the amount of mental effort being used. Spaced repetition, reviewing information at increasing intervals. Great, here's how you might use these in conversation. I couldn't absorb any more information after 3 hours of studying. I finally had a breakthrough with phrasal verbs last week. Listening to this podcast improves your retention of new vocabulary. Learning grammar rules creates a heavy cognitive load at first. Spaced repetition is scientifically proven to help you remember vocabulary. Here's something that will transform your learning journey. Emotion is the secret ingredient to memory. Research shows we remember things better when they have an emotional connection. That's why you might remember song lyrics in English perfectly but forget vocabulary you've studied repeatedly. Try this when learning new words. Connect them to personal experiences or strong mental images. For example, to remember the word exhilarating, imagine yourself on a roller coaster, feeling that rush of excitement. Your brain will thank you. Let me share an extraordinary story about language learning. Did you hear about Scott Young? He completed MIT's 4-year computer science curriculum in just 12 months without attending a single class. But what's even more impressive, he later learned for languages to conversation level in just 1 year using immersion techniques. His secret, he called it the no English rule. When learning Spanish, he refused to speak, read, watch, or listen to anything in English for 3 months. His brain, desperate to communicate, accelerated the learning process dramatically. While that's extreme, even small periods of total immersion can supercharge your progress. Now, let's talk about a revolutionary learning technique called interleaving. Most of us practice one skill at a time, maybe grammar for an hour, then vocabulary, then listening. But research shows mixing these up in unpredictable patterns creates stronger neural connections. Instead of studying present perfect tense for an hour, try 15 minutes of present perfect, 15 minutes of vocabulary about travel, then 15 minutes of listening practice, and finally 15 more minutes of present perfect. This challenges your brain to switch contexts, which feels harder but leads to dramatically better long-term results. Time for a quick listening exercise I'll describe to learning scenarios. Try to identify which employs better psychology principles. Scenario A. Maria studies English by reading textbooks and memorizing vocabulary lists. She spends 2 hours every Sunday going through as much material as possible. Scenario B. Carlos learns 5 new words each day related to topics he's passionate about. He creates flashcards with personal examples and reviews them briefly before breakfast and dinner. Once weekly, he watches a short English video about his favorite hobby. Which approach do you think works better? If you chose scenario B, you're absolutely right. Carlos is using spaced repetition, emotional connection, and manageable cognitive load, all powerful psychological principles. Here's another game-changing insight. Teaching is the ultimate learning tool. When you explain something to someone else, your brain processes information differently, more deeply and thoroughly. That's why our community forums are so valuable. Try this after listening to this podcast. Record yourself explaining one concept from today to an imaginary friend. This simple exercise will dramatically improve your retention and speaking skills simultaneously. Let's practice some useful phrases about learning that you can use immediately. I've been experimenting with different learning strategies. I noticed a significant improvement when I started. What learning technique works best for you? I hit a plateau with my speaking skills until I tried. The most effective approach for me has been. These phrases will help you discuss your language learning journey with others and sound natural doing it. We're approaching the end of today's episode, but I can't let you go without sharing one last powerful technique: visualization. Olympic athletes use this method religiously, and it works just as well for language learning. Before your next English conversation, spend 2 minutes visualizing yourself speaking confidently, finding words easily, and connecting with the other person. Your brain actually processes this visualization similarly to real practice. Incredible, right? This week's challenge: spend just 3 minutes before bed visualizing yourself using English successfully in a specific situation, maybe ordering food at a restaurant or explaining your job in an interview. Do this daily and share your experience using #ArtificialFluencyMind. Listening to these stories will train your ears to catch different words, phrases, and sentence structures. You can also write down what you hear to practice spelling and grammar. If you find this helpful, press the like button and stay with us for more daily lessons. Let's begin with a question. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone helped you in an unexpected way? Think about a time when a small act of kindness made a big difference. Today, I will share a story about Daniel, a man who learned the power of kindness when he least expected it. Daniel was on his way home after a long day at work. It was raining, and he forgot his umbrella. He ran to the bus stop, but just as he arrived, he saw the bus driving away. Frustrated and cold, he stood there wondering what to do next. An elderly man named Mr. Johnson, who was also waiting for the bus, noticed Daniel's situation. "You look like you've had a tough day," Mr. Johnson said with a warm smile. "Don't worry, the next bus will be here in 10 minutes. Here, take my umbrella. I have a hat, so I'll be fine." Daniel hesitated. "Are you sure? I don't want to take your umbrella." Mr. Johnson nodded. "Of course. Kindness always comes back to us in unexpected ways." Feeling grateful, Daniel accepted the umbrella. A few days later, he saw Mr. Johnson again at the bus stop. This time, Daniel had bought a new umbrella for him. He handed it over with a smile. "Thank you for your kindness. I wanted to return the favor." Mr. Johnson laughed and said, "See, that's how kindness works. It spreads." This simple moment taught Daniel an important lesson. Small acts of kindness can change someone's day and even create a chain reaction of goodness. Now think about this. Have you ever helped a stranger or been helped by one? How did it make you feel? A few months after that rainy day, Daniel had another experience that reminded him of the power of kindness. One evening, he stopped by a small grocery store to pick up some food. As he stood in line at the checkout, he noticed a woman in front of him, searching through her purse. She looked worried. She turned to the cashier and said, "I think I forgot my wallet at home." The cashier, a young man named Eric, looked sympathetic, but unsure of what to do. Daniel watched for a moment, then stepped forward. "How much is it?" he asked. The woman looked embarrassed. "It's only $12, but I don't want to cause any trouble." Daniel smiled. "Don't worry about it. I've been in situations where someone helped me, so I'd like to do the same for you." The woman hesitated, then accepted. "Thank you so much. I'll pay you back if I see you again." Daniel shook his head. "Just do something kind for someone else when you get the chance." The cashier smiled as he handed over the bag. "That's really nice of you. Not everyone would do that." As Daniel walked home, he felt a deep sense of happiness. He realized that kindness was not just about giving money or objects. It was about noticing when someone needed help and taking action, even in small ways. Think about this. Have you ever had a chance to help someone unexpectedly? Maybe you helped carry someone's groceries, held the door open, or gave directions to a lost traveler. These small actions can brighten someone's day. One weekend, Daniel decided to visit his friend Mr. Roberts, who lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. Mr. Roberts was an older man, retired from his job as a school teacher. He had been a great mentor to Daniel when he was younger, always sharing wisdom and advice about life. They often met for tea and long conversations about work, family, and the importance of helping others. As Daniel walked through the peaceful streets, he noticed a man struggling with a flat tire on the side of the road. The man, whose name was Thomas looked frustrated as he tried to loosen the bolts on his car's wheel. His hands were dirty and his shirt was soaked with sweat. Daniel stopped and asked, "Hey, do you need some help?" Thomas wiped his forehead and sighed. "I would really appreciate it. The bolts are too tight and I can't seem to get them off." Daniel had changed a tire before, so he knelt down to take a closer look. He grabbed the wrench and applied steady pressure. After a few minutes of effort, the bolts finally loosened, and together they replaced the flat tire with the spare. Thomas let out a relieved laugh. "Wow, thank you so much. I thought I was going to be stuck here all day," Daniel smiled. "No problem." Thomas extended his hand for a handshake. "I really appreciate this. I was on my way to pick up my wife from work, and she would have been waiting for a long time if you hadn't stopped to help." Daniel shook his hand. "I'm glad I could help. Drive safely." As Thomas drove away, Daniel continued on his way to Mr. Roberts' house. When he arrived, the older man greeted him warmly and led him to the kitchen, where tea was already brewing. "You look like you had an interesting morning," Mr. Roberts said as he poured Daniel a cup of tea. Daniel chuckled. "Yeah, I helped a guy change his tire on the way here. He was struggling, and I figured I could make his day a little easier." Mr. Roberts nodded in approval. "That's a good thing, Daniel. When you help someone without expecting anything in return, you build connections with people. You never know when kindness will come back to you." As they sat down to drink their tea, Mr. Roberts began telling a story from his younger days. "When I was in my 20s, he said, "I was once stranded on a deserted road late at night. My car had run out of gas, and there were no gas stations nearby. I didn't have a phone back then, so I had no way to call for help. I stood by the road for nearly an hour, waving at passing cars, but nobody stopped." Daniel listened closely, interested in the story. "Finally," Mr. Roberts continued, "a man in a pickup truck pulled over. He got out and asked what was wrong. When I explained the situation, he didn't hesitate. He told me to hop in, and he drove me to the nearest gas station, which was 5 miles away. Then he waited while I filled up a small gas can and drove me back to my car." Daniel raised his eyebrows. "That's really kind of him." Mr. Roberts nodded. "It was, and I never forgot it. That moment taught me something important. People remember kindness. Years later, I had the chance to help someone in a similar situation. A young man was stuck on the highway with no gas, just like I had been. So I stopped and helped him, just like that man had helped me." Daniel thought about what his friend had said. It reminded him of the moments when he had been helped by strangers, like the time Mr. Johnson had given him an umbrella on a rainy day. He realized that kindness was like a chain. One act of generosity led to another. "That's a good lesson," Daniel said, sipping his tea. "It reminds me of what happened when I bought groceries for that woman who forgot her wallet. She was embarrassed at first, but I told her she didn't need to pay me back. I just asked her to do something kind for someone else when she had the chance." Mr. Roberts smiled. "That's exactly it, Daniel. Kindness spreads. When one person helps another, it creates a ripple effect. You might never see the full impact of your actions, but they can change someone's life in ways you'll never know." Daniel sat back in his chair, thinking about everything they had talked about. He had always believed in being kind to others, but today's conversation made him realize just how powerful it really was. After finishing his tea, Daniel said goodbye to Mr. Roberts and started walking home. On the way, he thought about all the small moments of kindness he had experienced. Mr. Johnson's umbrella, the stranger who had helped him when his car broke down once, and even the friendly cashier who had given him a free cup of coffee one cold morning. He decided that from now on, he would make an even greater effort to help people, no matter how small the act might seem. Whether it was offering directions, helping someone carry heavy bags, or simply sharing a kind word, he knew that every action mattered. As he reached his apartment, he saw his neighbor, Mrs. Taylor, struggling to carry a large bag of groceries up the stairs. Without hesitation, Daniel rushed over and said, "Let me help you with that." Mrs. Taylor smiled. "Oh, thank you, dear. That's very kind of you." Daniel carried the bag up to her door and set it down. "It's no problem at all." As he walked back to his own door, he smiled to himself. Helping others didn't just make the other person feel good, it made him feel good too. Now think about this. Have you ever experienced kindness from a stranger? Or have you ever helped someone and felt happy about it afterward? These small moments shape our lives, and by listening to stories like these, you're not just improving your English, you're also learning valuable lessons about life. Let's continue with another story. One evening, Daniel was walking home from work when he noticed something unusual. A man was standing near the entrance of a small bakery, looking around nervously. He wore an old jacket and his shoes were covered in dust, as if he had been walking for miles. His hands were tucked deep into his pockets, and he kept glancing at the display window of the bakery, where fresh loaves of bread and pastries were neatly arranged. Daniel slowed his pace, observing the man. It was clear that he was hungry, but he wasn't going inside. Instead, he stood there, watching as other people walked in and out, carrying bags of warm bread and cakes. Curious, Daniel approached him. "Hey, are you all right?" The man looked up, surprised that someone was speaking to him. He hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, I'm okay." Daniel noticed the way he avoided eye contact, the way his shoulders slumped. It reminded him of a time in his own life when he had struggled financially. "Are you waiting for someone?" Daniel asked kindly. The man hesitated again, then sighed. "Not really. I haven't eaten today. And this bakery smells so good. But I don't have any money." Daniel felt a deep sense of empathy. He had been in difficult situations before. Maybe not exactly like this, but he understood what it felt like to need help and not know where to turn. Without a second thought, Daniel said, "Come inside with me. Let's get you something to eat." The man's eyes widened. "Oh no, you don't have to." "I want to," Daniel said firmly. "Come on." Together they stepped inside the bakery. The warm air smelled of freshly baked bread and cinnamon rolls. The cashier, a young woman with curly hair, greeted them with a smile. "What can I get for you?" she asked. Daniel turned to the man. "Pick whatever you like." The man hesitated as if he wasn't sure he was really allowed to. Then slowly he pointed to a loaf of bread. "Just this would be enough." Daniel shook his head. "That's not enough for a full meal? How about a sandwich and something to drink too?" The man looked both grateful and embarrassed. "Are you sure?" Daniel nodded. "Of course." The cashier rang up their order and Daniel paid. They sat down at a small table by the window while the man ate. With every bite, he seemed to relax a little more. After a few moments of silence, the man finally spoke. "My name is Henry." "Nice to meet you, Henry. I'm Daniel." Henry wiped his mouth with a napkin. "I wasn't always in this situation. You know, I used to have a job, a house, everything. But things changed. I lost my job, then my home. It's been hard." Daniel listened carefully. "I understand. Life can be unpredictable. But you're not alone. There are always people who care." Henry nodded slowly. "Not many, though. Most people just walk past me like I don't exist. Daniel thought about that. How many times had he himself walked past someone who needed help without stopping? He had been caught up in his own world, too busy to notice others' struggles. No, Daniel said. When I was younger, someone helped me when I really needed it. A complete stranger. That's why I believe in helping others when I can. Henry looked thoughtful. That's rare these days. Daniel smiled. Maybe. But kindness is like a chain. If someone helps you and then you help someone else, it keeps going. You don't have to repay me. Just remember this moment, and one day, when you're in a better place, help someone else. Henry nodded, his eyes brighter than before. I will. After finishing his meal, Henry thanked Daniel again. They shook hands, and as Daniel left the bakery, he felt a deep sense of peace. As he walked home, he thought about how easy it was to change someone's day with a small act of kindness. It didn't take much, just noticing when someone needed help and taking action. A few weeks later, Daniel was at the supermarket when he heard a familiar voice. Daniel? He turned around and saw Henry, looking cleaner and more confident than before. He was wearing a fresh shirt and had a small bag of groceries in his hands. Henry grinned. I found a job. It's not much, but it's a start. I just wanted to say thank you again. That meal you bought me, it wasn't just food. It reminded me that there are good people in the world. Daniel smiled. That's great, Henry. I'm really happy for you. Henry nodded. I also did something. Yesterday, I saw a man on the street who looked lost. He asked me for some change, and I didn't have much, but I gave him what I could, and I told him what you told me. Kindness is like a chain. Daniel felt a surge of happiness. Henry had not only improved his own situation, but had already started helping others. That's exactly how it works, Daniel said. Henry patted his grocery bag. Now I just need to keep working hard and keep moving forward. You will, Daniel said confidently. I believe in you. As they parted ways, Daniel realized something important. He had once thought that small actions didn't matter much, but now he knew that even the simplest act of kindness could have a long-lasting impact. Think about this. Have you ever helped someone in a way that seemed small to you but meant a lot to them? Maybe you offered a kind word to someone having a bad day, helped a neighbor carry their groceries, or simply listened when someone needed to talk. When you listen to real-life stories like these, you not only improve your English but also learn how meaningful human connections can be. Keep listening and let's continue with another story. One cold morning, Daniel woke up early to get ready for work. The sky was still dark and the streets were quiet. He made himself a cup of coffee, grabbed his coat and stepped outside. The air was crisp, and a thin layer of frost covered the sidewalks. He took a deep breath and started walking toward the bus stop. As he approached the bus stop, he saw an older woman standing there, shivering in the cold. She was wearing a thin sweater, and her hands were tucked into her sleeves. Her face looked tired, and her shoulders were hunched. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then walked up to her. "Good morning," he said. "It's really cold today. Are you okay?" The woman looked up at him, surprised. "Oh, good morning," she said, her voice soft. "Yes, I'm all right. Just a little cold." Daniel noticed that she wasn't carrying a bag or a purse, just a small plastic bag with what looked like a loaf of bread inside. "Do you take this bus every day?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, I go to the community center downtown. They serve breakfast there and I like to sit and talk with people. Daniel smiled. That sounds nice. Do you have family nearby? The woman hesitated before shaking her head. No, my husband passed away a few years ago. My children live in another state. I don't see them very often. Daniel felt a pang of sympathy. She reminded him of his own grandmother, who had always loved talking to people and making new friends. The bus arrived and they both got on. Daniel sat next to her and continued the conversation. What's your name? He asked. Margaret, she said with a small smile. And yours? Daniel, he replied. It's nice to meet you, Margaret. As the bus moved through the city, Margaret started to open up. She told Daniel about how she used to be a teacher, how she had spent years helping children learn to read and write. She talked about her late husband, how they had met when they were young, and the memories they had shared. Daniel listened carefully, nodding and asking questions. He could see that Margaret was happy to have someone to talk to. When they reached downtown, Daniel saw a small coffee shop near the bus stop. He turned to Margaret and said, Would you like to have a cup of coffee with me before you go to the community center? Margaret's eyes brightened. Oh, that would be lovely. They walked into the coffee shop and Daniel ordered 2 cups of hot coffee. They sat by the window watching people walk by outside. As they drank their coffee, Margaret shared more about her life. You know, she said, I used to love baking. When my children were little, I would bake fresh bread and cookies every jolly weekend. Daniel smiled. That sounds wonderful. Do you still bake? Margaret shook her head. Not really. It's not as fun when you're baking for just yourself. Daniel thought for a moment. Maybe you could teach others. The community center has a kitchen, right? Maybe there are people who would love to learn from you. Margaret's eyes widened. I never thought about that. That's actually a wonderful idea. Daniel could see the excitement in her face. She had found something to look forward to. After finishing their coffee, Margaret thanked Daniel. You've made my morning so much better, she said. I was feeling a little lonely, but now I feel like I have a new friend. Daniel smiled. I'm glad. And I hope you start baking again. You have so much to share. They said goodbye, and as Daniel walked to work, he felt warm despite the cold air. He had simply taken a few minutes to talk to someone, but it had made a big difference. A few weeks later, Daniel was walking downtown when he passed the community center. He saw a group of people gathered in the kitchen, laughing and talking. Curious, he stepped inside. To his surprise, Margaret was there, wearing an apron and showing a group of people how to knead dough. She looked up and saw Daniel. Her face lit up. Daniel, come in. Daniel walked over and Margaret introduced him to the group. Everyone, this is Daniel. He's the one who gave me the idea to start this baking class. The people around the table smiled and greeted him. Margaret turned back to him. You were right. Teaching others is just as fun as baking for family. I feel happy again. Daniel felt a deep sense of joy. A simple conversation had led to something meaningful. Margaret handed him a warm slice of bread. Here, try this. Daniel took a bite. It was soft, fresh, and delicious. As he left the community center, he thought about how powerful small actions could be. A simple cup of coffee, a kind conversation, a thoughtful suggestion. These little things could change someone's life. Now think about this. Have you ever had a conversation with someone that made a difference in their life? Or has someone ever spoken to you at just the right moment, when you needed it most? By listening to stories like these, you're not just improving your English. You're also learning about the beauty of human connection. Let's continue with another story. It was a chilly autumn morning when Daniel stepped out of his apartment, tightening his coat against the cool breeze. The sky was painted with shades of pink and orange as the sun slowly rose, casting a soft glow over the quiet streets. The crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves, a reminder that winter was just around the corner. Daniel had a long day ahead, but he decided to take a different route to work, one that passed through the old neighborhood park. He hadn't walked this way in months, and he was eager to see if anything had changed. As he strolled down the narrow sidewalk, he noticed an elderly man sitting alone on a wooden bench near the fountain. The man wore a faded brown coat, and his hands rested on a wooden cane. His face was lined with age, and his gaze was fixed on the pigeons pecking at breadcrumbs on the ground. Daniel hesitated for a moment before walking over. He had always believed that small conversations could make a big difference, and something about the man's expression made him want to say hello. "Good morning," Daniel said with a warm smile. The old man looked up, surprised at first, but then nodded. "Good morning, young man," he replied, his voice deep and steady. Daniel sat down on the bench, leaving a respectful distance. "It's a peaceful morning, isn't it?" The man chuckled softly. "Yes, it is. Mornings like this remind me of when my wife and I used to walk here together. She loved watching the sun rise over the trees." Daniel's interest grew. "That sounds beautiful. Do you still come here often?" The old man nodded. "Every day. Even though she's not with me anymore, I feel close to her here. We spent many years sitting on this very bench, talking about everything and nothing at all." Daniel could hear the deep affection in the man's voice. "That must have been really special. How long were you married?" 52 years, the man said proudly. "Her name was Eleanor. She had the most beautiful laugh. No matter how difficult life got, she always found a reason to smile." Daniel admired the man's devotion. "That's incredible. Not many people get to spend that much time with the person they love." The man sighed, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of memories. "We had our challenges, of course. Marriage isn't always easy. But we made a promise to always be there for each other. And we kept that promise." Daniel thought about his own life. He had always been busy with work, never taking much time to think about love and commitment in that way. "What's the secret to a lasting marriage?" he asked curiously. The old man smiled. "Patience, understanding, and kindness. But most importantly, never stop communicating. Even when you're angry, even when you're tired, talk to each other. Share your thoughts, your fears, your dreams. That's what keeps a bond strong." Daniel nodded, letting the words sink in. "That's great advice. I think a lot of people forget how important communication is." The man chuckled again. "These days, everyone is too busy looking at their phones instead of talking to the person sitting next to them, but real connection happens face to face." Daniel looked around the park. He noticed a few people jogging, some walking their dogs, and others sitting on benches, lost in their own worlds. He realized how rare it was for strangers to have conversations like this anymore. The old man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn-out photograph. He handed it to Daniel. "This was taken on our 25th wedding anniversary." Daniel looked at the picture. It showed a younger version of the man, standing next to a woman with kind eyes and a radiant smile. They were holding hands, standing in front of the very same fountain. "You both look so happy," Daniel said. The old man nodded. "We were. Life wasn't perfect, but we made the most of every moment." Daniel returned the photograph. Thank you for sharing this with me. I feel like I learned something valuable today. The old man patted Daniel's shoulder. I'm glad. And if you ever find someone special, remember, love isn't about grand gestures, it's about the little things you do every day. Daniel smiled. I'll remember that. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Daniel realized he needed to get to work. He stood up and shook the old man's hand. It was really nice talking to you. The pleasure was mine, the man said. Have a good day, young man. Daniel walked away, feeling lighter. The conversation had been unexpected, but it left him with a new perspective. He had started the morning thinking about work and deadlines, but now he was thinking about something deeper, about relationships, about time, about what truly matters in life. As he reached the bus stop, he saw a young couple sitting nearby, both looking at their phones, not speaking to each other. He smiled to himself, thinking about what the old man had said. Maybe today he would try something different. Maybe he would put his phone away more often and really listen to the people around him. As the bus arrived, he stepped on with a sense of gratitude. Life was full of lessons, and sometimes the most meaningful ones came from unexpected conversations. Now take a moment to think. Have you ever learned something valuable from a stranger? Sometimes the wisdom we need comes from the most unexpected places. By listening to stories like these, you're not just improving your English. You're also learning about the world and the people in it. Let's continue with another story. On a quiet evening in the heart of the city, Daniel sat in a small cafe, sipping a cup of hot tea while watching people pass by. The cafe was warm and inviting, with the soft glow of yellow lights and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. It had been a long day at work, and he needed a moment to unwind. As he stared out the window, lost in thought, he heard a voice nearby. Excuse me, is this seat taken? Daniel looked up to see a man in his early 50s standing beside his table. He had a kind face, graying hair, and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a dark coat and carried a small notebook in his hand. No. Go ahead, Daniel said, moving his bag to make space. The man sat down and let out a deep sigh. Long day? He asked with a friendly smile. Daniel nodded. Yeah, just one of those days where everything feels a bit overwhelming. The man chuckled. I know the feeling. Life has a way of keeping us on our toes. There was a moment of silence before the man extended his hand. I'm Richard, by the way. Daniel, he replied, shaking his hand. Richard placed his notebook on the table and took a sip of his coffee. You know, whenever I feel overwhelmed, I like to write things down. It helps me clear my mind. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Really? What do you write about? Anything and everything, Richard said with a smile. Thoughts, memories, lessons I've learned. Daniel leaned back in his chair. That's interesting. I've never been much of a writer. Richard chuckled. Neither was I at first. But life has a way of teaching us things. And sometimes we don't realize how much we've learned until we write it down. Daniel was curious. What's something you've learned recently? Richard opened his notebook and flipped through a few pages before stopping at one. He tapped the page with his finger. This. I wrote it last week. Daniel leaned forward as Richard read aloud. Time is the one thing we never get back. We chase money, success, and recognition. But in the end, all that truly matters is how we spend our time and who we spend it with. Daniel listened carefully. The word struck a chord. That's deep. I think a lot of us forget that. Richard nodded. We do. We get so caught up in daily life that we forget to slow down and appreciate what really matters. Daniel thought for a moment. So, what's something you regret not doing sooner? Richard smiled thoughtfully. Spending more time with my family. When I was younger, I was so focused on my career that I missed a lot of important moments. My daughter's first school play, my son's soccer matches, even simple dinners with my wife. I always told myself, I'll make time later. But later doesn't always come. Daniel felt a strange sense of familiarity in Richard's words. He too often prioritized work over personal time. Richard continued, One day my daughter sat me down and said, Dad, you're always busy. I feel like I don't really know you. That hit me hard. Daniel could see the emotion in Richard's eyes. What did you do after that? Richard sighed. I changed. I started leaving work earlier. I started making time. And you know, what? I realized that the world doesn't stop if you take a break. Success isn't just about work. It's about the relationships you build along the way. Daniel let the words sink in. That's something I need to remember. I always tell myself that I'm working hard for the future, but maybe I'm missing the present. Richard smiled. It's never too late to change. Every day is a new chance to make better choices. Just then, the cafe door opened and a young woman walked in, looking around. When she spotted Richard, her face lit up with a big smile. Dad, she called, walking over to the table. Richard stood up with a grin. Emma, right on time. Daniel watched as Richard hugged his daughter. She was in her mid-20s with bright eyes and a cheerful expression. Sorry I'm late, she said, sitting down. Traffic was crazy. No worries, Richard replied. I was just having a great conversation with Daniel here. Emma turned to Daniel with a warm smile. Nice to meet you, Daniel smiled back. Nice to meet you too. Richard glanced at his watch. Well, we should get going. We have a little father-daughter dinner planned. Emma nodded enthusiastically. Yep. He promised to teach me how to cook my grandmother's famous stew. Richard chuckled. See, I'm making up for lost time. Daniel watched as they gathered their things. Before leaving, Richard turned to him and said, Remember, Daniel, don't wait until it's too late to spend time with the people who matter. Work will always be there, but people won't. Daniel nodded. Thanks for the advice. I won't forget it. As Richard and Emma walked out of the cafe, Daniel sat back and thought about everything they had talked about. He reached for a napkin and picked up a pen from the table. For the first time in a long time, he started writing. Time is the one thing we never get back. Now, take a moment to reflect. Who is someone in your life that you haven't spent enough time with? Is there a call you need to make? A visit you need to plan? Sometimes life's greatest lessons come from unexpected encounters. Let's continue with another story. It was a cool Saturday morning and Daniel woke up feeling a little restless. The sun peeked through his curtains, casting soft golden light across his small apartment. He had planned to stay in, maybe read a book or catch up on emails, but something inside him told him he needed to go out. Maybe a walk would help clear his mind. After a quick breakfast, he put on his jacket and stepped outside. The streets were calm, with only a few early risers out and about. He decided to take a stroll through a part of the city he hadn't visited in years. A quiet neighborhood where he used to live as a child. As he walked past familiar buildings, memories came rushing back. The small bakery where his mother used to buy fresh bread every morning. The bookstore where he had spent hours reading as a teenager, and the old playground where he and his younger brother used to run around without a care in the world. Lost in thought, he turned a corner and found himself in front of a tiny, old-fashioned shop. The wooden sign above the door read, "Mr. Carter's Repair Shop." Daniel's eyes widened. He hadn't seen or thought about. Mr. Carter was an elderly man who used to fix almost anything: broken radios, watches, lamps, even bicycles. When Daniel was a boy, he would often visit the shop just to watch Mr. Carter work. He loved seeing how the old man carefully took things apart and put them back together, making broken things useful again. Curious, Daniel pushed the door open. A small bell above the door chimed, and the familiar scent of wood, oil, and old books filled the air. The shop looked exactly as he remembered: clocks ticking on the walls, shelves filled with tools, and an old workbench in the center of the room. And there, sitting behind the counter, was Mr. Carter. The old man looked up, adjusting his glasses. His hair was completely white now, but his sharp eyes still held the same warmth. "Well, well," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "If it isn't little Daniel. Haven't seen you in years, son." Daniel grinned. "It's been a long time, Mr. Carter. I wasn't even sure this place was still here." Mr. Carter chuckled. "Still here. Still fixing things. Though these days people don't bring me as much to repair. Everyone just buys new things instead of fixing the old ones." Daniel nodded, looking around. "That's true. People throw things away so quickly now." Mr. Carter gestured for him to sit. "And not just things, my boy. People give up on relationships, dreams, even themselves. No one has the patience to fix things anymore." Daniel sat down, thinking about what he had just heard. "That's kind of sad." "It is," Mr. Carter agreed. "But I believe anything worth keeping is worth fixing. Let me tell you a story." Daniel leaned in, listening carefully. "Many years ago," Mr. Carter began, "a young man came into my shop. He was frustrated, carrying an old broken pocket watch. It had belonged to his father and it had stopped working. He told me he had taken it to 3 different repair shops, but they all said it was beyond saving. They told him to throw it away and buy a new one." Daniel listened closely as Mr. Carter continued. "But you know me," the old man said with a twinkle in his eye. "I don't believe in throwing things away so easily. So I took the watch, opened it up, and carefully examined every tiny piece. It was a mess: gears out of place, dust clogging the mechanism, a missing screw. It wasn't an easy job, but I worked on it for hours, cleaning each part, adjusting the gears, and finding a replacement screw from another old watch. And you know what happened?" Daniel shook his head. "What?" Mr. Carter smiled. "The watch started ticking again." Daniel couldn't help but smile. "That must have been a great feeling." "It was," Mr. Carter said. "But do you know what was even better? The young man's reaction. He looked at that watch like it was a miracle. He said, 'This is more than just a watch. It's my father's memory. It reminds me of him every time I look at it.'" Daniel felt a strange warmth in his chest. Mr. Carter leaned forward. "And that's when I realized, sometimes, fixing things isn't just about the object. It's about the meaning behind it. People are quick to give up on things when they seem broken. But with patience and effort, a lot of things can be repaired. Watches, friendships, even hearts." Daniel sat in silence, absorbing the words. Finally he spoke. "That's really powerful, Mr. Carter. And I think you're right. People give up too easily. Maybe we all need to try a little harder before deciding something is beyond fixing." The old man nodded. "Exactly. The world teaches us that when something is broken, we should throw it away. But sometimes we just need to take a closer look and put in the work." Daniel looked around the shop. at the old clock still ticking, at the tools neatly arranged on the shelves. This place was more than just a repair shop. It was a place of patience, of second chances. He stood up and shook Mr. Carter's hand. "Thank you for the story. I think I needed to hear that today." Mr. Carter smiled warmly. "Anytime, son, and remember, don't be too quick to give up on the things that matter." As Daniel stepped out of the shop, he felt lighter. He thought about the people in his life, about things he had given up on too quickly. Maybe it was time to fix some things. Now take a moment to think. Have you ever given up on something too quickly? Maybe it was a friendship, a goal, or even a personal challenge. Before deciding something is beyond saving, ask yourself, have you really tried to fix it? Listening to real-life stories like these not only helps you improve your English but also teaches important life lessons. As Daniel walked down the street, his mind was still on the conversation with Mr. Carter. He had always been the type of person who rushed through life, always on the go, trying to get things done quickly. But something about the old man's words had left a deep impression on him. Maybe it was time to slow down, to pay more attention to the things he had been ignoring. He decided to take a longer walk through the park nearby. The park was quiet with only a few people scattered around, some jogging, some walking their dogs, and others sitting on benches, reading or chatting. It was a peaceful place, and Daniel felt a sense of calm as he walked along the winding paths, listening to the sound of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the trees. As he walked, he came across a small playground. There was a young boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, playing alone. He was climbing up a jungle gym, trying to reach the top. Daniel couldn't help but smile as he watched the boy's determination. He was struggling a little, but he didn't give up. He kept trying, over and over until finally he made it to the top and let out a victorious cheer. Daniel walked over to him. "Great job. That was impressive," he said. The boy looked at him with a proud smile. "Thanks. I kept trying until I did it." Daniel knelt down to his level. "I could see that. You didn't give up. That's something a lot of people forget to do. Sometimes when things get tough, people just stop trying. But you kept going and you made it." The boy nodded eagerly. "Yeah, it's fun to try again," Daniel chuckled. "It sure is. You know, when I was your age, I would have given up halfway through. But watching you today, I realize how important it is to keep trying, even when it's hard." The boy smiled brightly. "You can do anything if you don't give up." Daniel stood up, feeling inspired by the boy's simple yet powerful words. "You're right. You can do anything if you don't give up." As he walked away, he couldn't help but think about the lessons he had learned that day. The stories from Mr. Carter and the boy in the playground were reminders of something he had forgotten, the value of persistence. Later that afternoon, Daniel met up with his friend Alex at a local cafe. Alex was one of those people who always seemed to be full of energy, always excited about something new. He was a bit of a risk-taker, someone who loved to try new things, even if there was a chance of failure. "Hey Daniel, long time no see." Alex greeted him with a wide grin as Daniel sat down at the table. "Yeah, it's been a while," Daniel replied, smiling back. "How's everything going?" Alex leaned forward, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Great. I've been working on this new project. I'm thinking about starting a small business. It's something I've always wanted to do, and now I think it's time to take the leap." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "A business? That's a big step. What kind of business?" "I'm thinking of opening a cafe," Alex said enthusiastically. "But not just any cafe. It's going to be a place where people can relax, have a good meal, and maybe even learn something new." I want it to be a community spot where people come together. That sounds amazing, Daniel said, impressed. But starting a business is a huge challenge. Have you thought about all the things that could go wrong? Alex laughed. Of course. But I've also thought about everything that could go right. I believe that if you really want something, you have to take risks, and if you fail, you learn from it and try again. Daniel paused, reflecting on the conversation with Mr. Carter and the lesson from the boy at the playground. You know, Alex, I've been thinking about that a lot today, about not giving up and learning from failure. Alex nodded. Exactly. The best people I know are the ones who keep going, even when things don't work out at first. And when you try and fail, you get closer to success. Every failure teaches you something valuable. Daniel smiled. I guess I've been too focused on playing it safe. Maybe it's time I took a few more risks myself. Alex grinned. That's the spirit. Life is all about stepping out of your comfort zone and pushing your limits. If you keep doing the same thing, you'll never know what you're capable of. The conversation reminded Daniel of the importance of trying new things and pushing himself beyond his comfort zone. He realized that he had been too cautious for too long, always worried about making mistakes. But he now understood that failure wasn't something to fear. It was just a part of the journey. Later that evening, Daniel found himself at home, sitting at his desk with a notebook in front of him. He had a new idea for a project he had been thinking about for months but had been too afraid to start. As he stared at the blank page, he felt a surge of excitement. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for the perfect moment and just start. He picked up his pen and began to write. Step 1. Start. As he wrote down the first step of his new project, he felt a sense of purpose. The first step was always the hardest, but once you took it, everything else fell into place. Daniel looked around his apartment. It was small, but it was his. It was a space where he could create, learn, and grow. He had spent so many years focusing on work, on the things that were safe and predictable. But now, he understood the importance of taking risks, of pushing himself beyond his comfort zone. The next day, Daniel met with a few friends at the park. They were talking about their plans for the future, and Daniel couldn't help but share his new idea. He told them about his project and how he was finally taking the leap. That's amazing, Daniel, one of his friends said. I'm so proud of you. You've always been the kind of person who works hard, but now you're really taking charge of your own future. Daniel smiled, feeling the support of his friends. It's scary, but I'm excited. I've realized that the only way to grow is to challenge myself. And you'll do great, another friend added. Remember, failure isn't the end. It's just the beginning. And as long as you keep learning, you'll always get better. Daniel felt a wave of gratitude for his friends and the lessons he had learned that day. From Mr. Carter to the young boy at the playground to his conversation with Alex, everything had come together in a way he couldn't have planned. Now, as he looked forward to his new journey, he knew one thing for sure. He was ready. Have you ever felt like taking a risk or starting something new, but were too afraid to do it? What's something you've been putting off because you're worried about failing? Take a moment to reflect and think about how you can push yourself to take that first step. Let's continue with another story. As the sun set that evening, Daniel sat quietly on his balcony, reflecting on everything he had learned over the past few days. It had been a whirlwind of thoughts, ideas, and realizations, and he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had made a decision to take more chances and push himself beyond his comfort zone. Now, all that was left to do was to take the next step. But as he sat there, lost in his thoughts, His phone buzzed with a message from his friend Sarah. She had been one of his closest friends for years, someone who always seemed to have a different perspective on things. "Hey Daniel, are you free tomorrow? I want to talk to you about something." Curious, Daniel quickly replied, "Sure, what's up?" Sarah's message came in a few minutes later. "I've been thinking a lot lately about making a change in my life. I've been stuck in the same routine for so long, and I want to do something different, but I'm not sure where to start." Daniel smiled as he read her message. He knew exactly how she felt. For so long he had been in the same place, stuck in a routine, too scared to take that first step. But now things were different. He typed back, "I totally get that, Sarah. You know I've been feeling the same way recently. I think it's time for both of us to make a change. Maybe we can figure it out together." Sarah responded almost immediately. "That sounds great. Let's meet up tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you." The next day, Daniel met Sarah at their favorite cafe. As soon as he saw her, he could tell that she had been thinking deeply about her future. She looked a little nervous but also determined. "So, what's going on?" Daniel asked, sitting down across from her. Sarah took a deep breath. "I've been working at the same job for a few years now. It's not a bad job, but I'm not happy. I feel like I'm just going through the motions every day, and I know I could be doing more, but I'm scared to leave the safety of what I know." Daniel nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. He had been in the same position not too long ago. "I know that feeling. It's hard to leave something familiar, even if it's not making you happy. But sometimes you have to take risks in order to grow. Have you thought about what you—" Sarah looked down at her coffee cup, then up at Daniel. "I've always wanted to work with animals. I love them, and I think it would make me feel more fulfilled. But I'm not sure how to get started. What if I fail?" Daniel smiled, remembering his own fears about failure. "You know, I used to feel the same way. I was worried about failing and making a mistake. But what I've learned is that failing isn't the end. It's just a part of the process. If you don't try, you'll never know what could be possible." Sarah looked thoughtful. "That's true. But what if I leave my job and it doesn't work out?" Daniel reached across the table and gently placed his hand on hers. "If it doesn't work out, you'll learn something new. You'll gain experience, and you'll be in a better position to try again. But if you don't take that step, you'll always wonder what could have been. And trust me, that's even scarier than trying and failing." Sarah nodded slowly, taking in Daniel's words. "You're right. I guess I've been holding myself back because I'm scared. But maybe it's time to face that fear." "That's the spirit," Daniel said, smiling. "We can do this together. Let's take the first step." The rest of their conversation was filled with excitement and ideas about how Sarah could start her journey toward working with animals. They talked about courses she could take, volunteer opportunities, and how she could slowly make the transition. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt hopeful. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to make the change. After their meeting, Daniel felt inspired by Sarah's courage. He knew that their conversation had been a turning point for both of them. They were no longer going to let fear control their lives. They were ready to take risks, learn from their mistakes, and grow. As Daniel walked home that afternoon, he thought about how far he had come. Only a few days ago, he had been uncertain and afraid to make a change. But now he was excited about the possibilities ahead. He had taken that first step, and he knew that, no matter what happened, he was on the right path. He thought about Sarah and how she had been brave enough to talk about her fears and dreams. He realized that sometimes all it takes is one conversation, one moment of clarity, to make a huge difference in your life. It wasn't always easy, but Daniel knew that the journey was worth it. Every step, every challenge, was a chance to learn and grow. And with that thought, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Have you ever had a conversation that changed the way you thought about something? Maybe you talked with a friend about your goals, or heard a story that inspired you. Take a moment to think about how these conversations have helped shape your journey. What step can you take today to move closer to your own goals? Let's continue with another story. As the weeks went by, Daniel found himself making small but important changes in his life. He had started taking his own advice, facing his fears and stepping out of his comfort zone. One day, while walking through the park, he met a woman named Lisa who was walking her dog. She had a friendly smile, and her dog, Max, was a golden retriever with a wagging tail that seemed to brighten the whole park. "Hey there, looks like Max is in a good mood today," Daniel said, smiling as he approached them. Lisa laughed. "Yeah, he's always like this. I'm Lisa, by the way." "I'm Daniel," he said. "It's nice to meet you. I'm just enjoying the walk, thinking about a few things." "I know what you mean," Lisa replied. "Sometimes a good walk can clear your mind. I've been thinking about making some changes in my own life." Daniel raised an eyebrow, curious. "What kind of changes?" Lisa paused, looking down at Max for a moment before looking back up at Daniel. "Well, I've been working in the same office job for years now. It's comfortable, but I don't feel passionate about it anymore. I've always wanted to start my own business, but I'm scared to leave the security of my job. I keep wondering if I'm doing the right thing by staying in something that feels safe, but unfulfilling." Daniel understood exactly how she felt. He had been in a similar position not long ago. "I get that. It's hard to take a risk when you're comfortable, but sometimes staying in one place can hold you back. I was in a similar situation, and I decided to make a change." Lisa looked interested. "What kind of change did you make?" "I decided to start pursuing my passion for writing. At first I wasn't sure how to make it work, but I started taking small steps." Lisa smiled. "That's really inspiring. I've been too focused on the fear of failure, but I think I need to take a chance. Maybe I'll start small, like you did." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. You don't have to dive in headfirst all at once. Start with small steps, learn as you go, and build from there. Even if it doesn't work out exactly as planned, you'll learn valuable lessons along the way. It's all about taking that first step." They continued walking through the park, chatting about their dreams and the challenges they had faced. Daniel realized how important these types of conversations were, the ones that helped you realize you weren't alone in your struggles, and that others had faced similar obstacles. Later that day, Daniel thought back to his conversation with Lisa. He realized that their talk had given him another boost of confidence. It was a reminder that taking small steps could lead to big changes. He had already made some progress in his own journey, but there was so much more to do. That evening, as Daniel sat at his desk, he took out his notebook and began writing. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't always easy, but each word felt like a small victory. He had made the decision to take risks, and he was slowly building a life that felt more aligned with his passions. A few days later, Daniel received a message from Sarah. She had taken the leap and started volunteering at an animal shelter to gain experience. She was nervous, but also excited. "I feel like I'm finally doing something that matters," she wrote. "I know it's just the beginning, but it feels like a step in the right direction." Daniel couldn't help but feel proud of her. He knew how hard it had been for her to make that first move, but now she was beginning to see the rewards of her bravery. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel and Sarah continued to share their progress with each other. Their conversations were full of excitement and challenges, but also gratitude for the changes they were making. They were no longer waiting for the perfect moment to start. They were creating those moments themselves. Daniel thought back to his conversation with Lisa in the park, and he realized how important it was to talk with others about your dreams and fears. Sometimes just sharing your thoughts could help you gain clarity and take the next step. It was easy to get stuck in your own head, but reaching out to others made the journey feel less lonely. So, what about you? What's one step you can take today towards something you've been dreaming about? Maybe it's starting small, like having a conversation about your goals or taking a small action toward your dream. The key is to keep moving forward one step at a time. Take a moment to reflect on your own journey. What changes have you been considering? And what's stopping you from taking the first step? Remember, every journey begins with a single step. And with each step you take, you're one step closer to the life you want to create. Let's keep moving forward, together. As Daniel continued his journey, he noticed something important. The more he took action, the more confident he became. It wasn't about having everything figured out or doing everything perfectly. It was about making progress, even if it was just a little bit each day. He started to see that growth didn't always happen in big leaps. Sometimes it was the small steps that led to the most lasting changes. One afternoon he was having coffee with his friend Emily, who was also going through a period of change in her life. Emily had recently left a job that she had been unhappy in for years, and she was now trying to figure out what her next move should be. "I feel like I'm in limbo," Emily said, taking a sip of her coffee. "I left my job, but I'm not sure what I should do next. It's like I'm just waiting for something to happen, but nothing seems to be moving forward." Daniel smiled gently. "I know that feeling. I was there not too long ago. It's hard when you've made a big change, but the next step isn't clear yet. But here's the thing. Sometimes the waiting part is just as important as the doing. It's where you can get clarity and discover what you truly want." Emily looked at him thoughtfully. "You think so? I've been feeling like I should be doing something right now, but maybe I need to be patient and let things come to me." "Exactly," Daniel said. "It's easy to get caught up in the pressure of having everything figured out right away, but sometimes the best thing you can do is take a break and listen to yourself. What do you really want? What makes you feel excited or fulfilled?" Emily took a deep breath and nodded. "I've always wanted to work with children, maybe as a teacher or counselor, but I never thought I could do it. I felt like I wasn't qualified enough, or that I didn't have what it takes. But maybe it's time to rethink that." Daniel's eyes lit up. "That's amazing. You've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you? I can tell. And the fact that you're considering it now shows you're ready. It doesn't matter if you don't have all the qualifications right now. What matters is that you're passionate about it and you can start taking steps to move in that direction." Emily smiled, her face lighting up with excitement. "You're right. I've been so focused on the fear of not being good enough that I forgot why I even want to do this in the first place. It's not about being perfect. It's about doing something that truly matters to me." Daniel leaned back in his chair, feeling proud of Emily. "Exactly. The fear will always be there to some extent, but that shouldn't stop you from pursuing what you love. It's about building momentum and taking those small steps. You'll learn along the way, and you'll grow." As they continued talking, Emily seemed to grow more and more energized by the possibility of pursuing her dream. The conversation had reminded her that she didn't have to have all the answers immediately. The most important thing was to start, and to trust herself enough to. That's all for today's episode of the Artificial Fluency Podcast. I'm absolutely certain these psychology-based techniques will revolutionize your English learning. Remember, understanding how your brain works gives you superpowers. If this episode sparked your curiosity, don't miss next week when we'll explore memory palaces and language learning, an ancient technique with modern applications that will blow your mind. Until then, this is Emma reminding you that your brain is built for language. Trust the process and keep speaking. See you next week.